Hello, Education 523. Dr. Allen here. Hope you're having a great week. Few things before I get started. One, I want to thank everyone for the patience with me being out last week, out of town. It seemed like everything went well. I was really trying to check my email pretty consistently or as best I could over the weekend. I do want to give a shout out to a couple of students who emailed me. The one link wasn't working on the discussion board for the topic. I think I got it sent out pretty early and everyone should have had access, but thank you for giving me that heads up. It was kind of working on my end, but then when I went into student view, it was quirky. So long story short, thank you and apologies on that. Um, also, this is half of academic semester class or basically the midterm. We're kind of flying through, so I'm not going to sit here and babble too much. As always, if you need anything to fire me an email, stop by my office, whatever works for you, Zoom, whatever. But I'm going to go ahead and jump in. And again, I'll do my best not to make this, since we're an asynchronous class, too much of me going crazy. But just want to give you an overview of the week and some of the topics that we're going to be talking about. So anyway, and of course, still kind of revolving around the flat world and education type topics. So with that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and pull up some of the things that I got from this coming week's readings related to flat world and education. That'll be chapter 7 and 8, which is on here. Some of the things we're going to talk about: the strong teaching theme, obviously, and teacher preparation and things to improve teaching has been a constant theme, I think, in this book, obviously. So that's going to be a topic. Global teaching, I'm going to dip my toes into that. But like I said last week, I know she was really making some points related to that. And I like that because we're going to revisit some of those points. But with the finished book, I want to kind of revisit them and tie them in together. I might make a note of a few things, though, today. Next week, really the only thing due this week is going to be the discussion. But I am going to go ahead and go over the Wakelet assignment, which is pretty straightforward. But since, again, we're a shorter class, I want to make sure everyone's thinking ahead so you're not getting too crammed up. So since it's a little light this week, maybe if anyone wants to knock it out with the Wakelet assignment, that is totally fine. But it's not due until the following week. Of course, always check the syllabus. With that being said, let me pull up my big themes and all that. Now, was I smart enough to actually load that up? Hey, I was. All right. I'm going to go ahead and expand on this a little bit. I'll kind of keep this to the point, but some of the big themes that I got from chapter 7, and I'll probably elaborate just a little bit on. Um, Daring Hammond Daring, I always back those up a little bit. But anyway, some of the things that she gets into with related to this chapter, she talks about, the theme that sharing information is important across all faculty and administration in terms of improving learning for all types of groups and such within a school community. I'm going to kind of back up because I felt like I mumbled on that. Some of the things that she's kind of getting, or the theme I took from it: faculty teams, faculty schools need to work together. Sometimes good teachers like to go into a little bit of an oasis. I always use the word silo, and they don't always share their techniques, or maybe that they're comfortable doing it and no one's bothering them. Uh, and and then ineffective or poor teachers sometimes have developed poor methods and they just continue to do that. Sometimes it's not the ineffective teacher's fault. It's something else that she gets into, which I think is going to go right into this. It goes into better teacher training, again, been a constant theme on this, and kind of getting going the right ways when you start to teach. Um, you know, I golf. I don't know. Well, actually, you can probably see that back there since I'm in my home office. But this applies to any sport, but I'm going to use golf as the analogy. A lot of times when you golf, if you have a swing technique and you're doing it something incorrectly, maybe you're kind of bending your elbow just a little too much, or you're a little quick through the ball. If you go to the driving range and you don't get the proper instruction on how to fix that, and you just keep doing it, you're just going to keep doing those bad techniques, and you're going to expound on it. It's going to get worse, and you're just not going to get better. It's kind of like teaching. If you don't have someone showing you or mentoring you along the way, a lot of those poor techniques that you're doing are just going to make um, things worse. As far as maybe it could be classroom management, maybe it could be how you grade, Maybe it's just being a more effective teacher in terms of communication. So that's kind of what I think she was getting into. Like, we need to build these communities, and that's going to be a constant theme, I think, in 7, and it was in 8. But sharing information for better curriculum, I think, was the way that I kind of summarized that in my mind, anyway. I kind of already mentioned it, but um, she makes the comparison in the book about teaching being very similar to the medical schools or medical educations around the turn of the 20th century, and just um, how you have to be willing to do a little bit of self-reflection in terms of education and what needs to be done and how it can be improved. um, there needs to be state and national structures in place for improvement. I think most people will acknowledge that there's things that need to be improved upon in education across all 50 states. We do a lot of things really well. There's some things that we could do a little better. And I think that's what she's getting into a little bit. There needs to be some reflection. Now, there's also got to be, again, this is something that I mentioned in some of the earlier elections, but there's got to be some sort of buy-in also. And that might be the trickiest part of all, not just among community, but among faculty, among administrators, among government officials. It's a big task. So that's another big theme I took from it. And also another thing, I don't want to take a too big a shot at her, but this was just one thing I was thinking about a little bit. This was 100 years ago also. I mean, just think about our population in the United States today and how much more diverse it is. And that kind of goes along with the theme of this class. You know, how you're going to approach instruction. One of the things we're going to talk a little bit about today is multicultural instruction, or at least what the University of Washington set up as dimensions of multicultural education. I don't know if all of that would have applied to instruction in 1910. And what I'm getting at here is it's a different world. I just came back from that conference in Florida, and one thing we were talking about, like, again, social studies background a little bit, we were talking about when you use film in class. Well, if you're using something like The Last Samurai, which, if we could get into some multicultural stuff with that in and of itself, but if you're using The Last Samurai, not only are you looking at it from the time period it's set, you have to look at the time period that it was made, which would have been, I think, 2002, 2003. That's 20 years ago. The world's a lot different place even now than it was 20 years ago. So those are just things that I was thinking about with these themes, but it's what she kind of came up with. Again, she gets into that global comparison again. And again, I don't want to dip my toe into that too much yet, because we're going to be doing that in a couple of weeks with the finished book. But I will make one point, so I don't forget a little bit of flow, hopefully, here. I'm going to post this up. It's not required viewing. I found it very interesting to watch as a teacher, and, well, former teacher, I guess, K through 12. I've showed this before in some other classes, and they've been interested. So I thought I'd go ahead and post this up on the Brightspace spot. But this is, you can see some of the weird stuff my son watches also on YouTube, but I forgot about that with Google. Anyway, some of it's social studies stuff. This is a program that was actually, it's set in the UK, and she makes some comparisons with the UK and the United States in the chapter, but they still use that Western style approach to teaching, where maybe we're doing more, it's not direct instruction. We're trying to do more group activities, things like that. Maybe a little more Piaget influence, I guess, or Dewey. It's mentoring, and getting a strong beginning is so important. And I think that gets into where she talks a lot about the role of administrators and how they're a critical part of this. And actually, some of your discussion posts, I think, have been really good and have talked about administration type issues that you see. I think pairing people up with a good mentor is so critical, not just giving it to someone because you have to do it, and just getting someone. Some of it might almost be like, I don't want to say a speed dating, but just getting a good personality match. I kind of did the old Scrooge McDuck, if you ever watched DuckTales from like the 80s. I don't know if anyone's was around or watched that in the 80s, but there was a saying that he used to always say, work smarter, not harder. She does a lot of charts on page 201, 202 about the hours that U.S. teachers spend actually teaching to groups, and why that is, and why doesn't it seem to be as effective as in other areas. So that was something I thought. So I checked those graphs out. If you haven't, when you were reading, and you might have just kind of overlooked those or anything, they're kind of interesting. And the big question I had to kind of jump back to a multicultural type lens, um, how diverse in terms of socioeconomics and cultural backgrounds are these other nations that she's talking about compared to the United States? Again, I'm going to try to avoid going too far down the road. But one thing that the Finnish book talks about, and it is getting a little different in Finland now, but especially when they were at number one at everything, uh, it was a very homogenous, homogeneous type population at the time. So that's something to keep in mind. Is there some diversity, and their approaches might not be, they might not be catering to certain groups, and that's something that some people think Finland is actually dropping in some of the rankings now, and some people think it might be because they're not diversifying their curriculum. So with that being said, that was chapter 7. Let me do one thing here. I'm going to stop share real quick. And hey, I'm back. Sorry if there was a little hiatus there between 7 and 8. I'm recording at home and someone just walked at my door. I didn't want to stop recording, so I paused it. Hopefully that worked well. So I'm going to jump back in here. There's our video. But let me pull our program back up one more time. And there it is. All right. Let's jump into, and I did not change this number, but that's an easy fix. That was chapter 8. Some of the things that he's talking about with community, or chapter 8, or she's talking about in chapter 8. Sorry, I'm getting back in my flow a little bit. Some of the things that she's talking about in chapter 8 are, it's the big one. And I don't think this is anything revolutionary. And if you've been in any education class before, you have probably heard this, but it's the idea of building communities and such in the classroom. Now, I will say this, and one thing I do like about this book, that is a buzzword a lot of times, like we need a community. We need to be a community, 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 community. That sounds fantastic. She actually talks about some ways that we need to build a community um, in this book. And and before I dive into it, it's just again something that popped into my mind. If anyone's from West Virginia or teaches in West Virginia, there's a really good example of some of the things she's talking about. And believe it or not, it's from the 30s. It's a New Deal school. If you've never heard of Arthurdale, I'll put a link up to that too, since I'm mentioning it. Sorry, some of this stuff is things that I think about with our classes. We're talking and such. But Arthurdale was a New Deal community, and it literally was the community, and the school was built. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Arthurdale was built with the school being the focus of the community. A lot of them were coal miners that were out of work during the Depression. So Eleanor Roosevelt had a big hand in it. She actually used to come up and visit. If you've ever been to a WVU football game in Morgantown and you stop at that rest stop on the top of the mountain in Preston County, if you're from West Virginia, over by the federal prison, don't go to the prison. Just go to the rest stop. There used to be, last time I was there, they had it down for cleaning. So hopefully they put it back up. But it's Eleanor Roosevelt at Arthurdale. I'm showing you where it is on the wall. But that whole community was based around the school, and everyone knew everything. Like the people who were working in Arthurdale was about building things for the schools, and it just expanded. They have something called Arthurdale Days. I don't want to get too much on a sidetrack, but I will put something up if you're interested in checking that out a little bit. I'm sure I can find a YouTube video, but I definitely know there's a link to it just you can visit it. But she talks about building communities. And the way she talks about this is, you need to provide things like workshops for parents, make parents involved. And I actually skipped over this, and I thought this was a really good suggestion. Talks about keeping students and teachers together longer, maybe for a longer period of time to kind of build those relationships. Could be time for classes, could be years. I was thinking about my own experience. I've taught at a few different schools. One thing I did do, I did teach at a parochial school for a while, loved it actually. But one thing about that, I usually had students for 2 years in a row just because of the way the content lined up. And I felt like I knew those students really well going into that second year. It eliminated a lot of that, that first month rules, establishing things. Students already knew that. We knew each other. We knew each other's, how we communicated, kind of like mine and theirs, quirks, if that makes sense. Things like that. She talks about that. And I think there's a lot of merit to that. And that's something that she talks about might work for all groups. She also talks about, and this is going to be something related to your assignment with the Wakelet, and of course with the the Zen project that you just did, but a diverse curriculum for all students and that idea of building relationships. She also cites the new tech high school in New York, where a lot of students of color, actually, the graduation rate is through the roof. And she talks a lot about what works for that school and why that happened. And actually, a lot of it is actually down below here, even though it was a different school, they used a lot of the same techniques. She talked about the Julia Richmond. This is a fact, but I kind of think it just goes along with the themes. But she talks about the Julia Richmond Educational Complex. Um, and what that complex did, it had a lot of the students' needs right there. This was an inner city school. And she talks about the complex having a daycare, a teen parenting center, a health center, schools for parents and their children, a lot of special education programs. I think she makes note of a specific autistic program for junior high students to kind of prep them for high school and such. There was a performing arts center. She just, that idea of, again, making the school the community. Arthur Dale, Julia Richmond, I think it's a very similar concept. The education complex isn't just the school, it's the community. Uh, Also, she breaks down on 244 what she thinks are make schools successful as far as a diverse curriculum, um, and allowing students to flourish. Some of this, again, I don't think it's revolutionary, and how you get there is probably money and politics and things like that. But small class sizes is a big one. Again, have a setup or a structure within your school for building relationships. That goes back to this. It goes back to maybe some of this. uh, Make sure your curriculum is challenging. It's interesting, and that's something we're going to talk about. Actually, you were doing it with the Zim project, but you want to. Sometimes you have to sell to your audience, and again, that's something that we've talked a little bit about with, like, when you're designing curriculum, you have to keep your classroom in mind, and you have to make those connections. Um, she talks about using performance-based instruction and assessment. I probably should have the word assessment there. I'll fix that too. Let me just go ahead and add that. Um, she also makes a note of collaborating. That's something that helps with a successful school and meeting the needs of all your students. So collaborating with other faculty. I didn't put it on here, but PD, make sure that you're doing professional development. Don't ever think you know it all. Try to expand. Try to go to workshops, things like that. Go to workshops with a good attitude. um, Things like that. There was a lot of times where we would have professional developments at the beginning of the year, and I know it's tough because you're trying to get your room together, you're trying to get this together, you got different rosters you got to get organized. There's a lot going on at the beginning of the year, but they always seem to schedule like a workshop or something. And I'm not saying I loved it all the time either, but it is important to kind of go in with a good attitude, because sometimes counties do bring in pretty effective speakers. I'm not going to say that they all are, but it's good to keep an open mind. Or if you can go to a conference, it's what I always tell my student teachers when they get hired. If you have an opportunity maybe to go to your content area conference, I just went to National Council of Social Studies not too long ago. Go. Try to pick up something. If you can just bring back one thing, that's more than you had when you went. So again, that's kind of chapter 8 in the summary. My big question, I kind of probably already spoiled it talking about Arthur Dale a little bit, but she uses a lot of urban examples, which is very important. I'm not trying to belittle that, but I was kind of thinking about this a little bit from a West Virginia perspective, because a lot of the issues in Appalachia are similar, especially the socioeconomic. But as far as like how do we get these students also to pull up? A lot of the schools, and I don't know if Berkeley and Jefferson County would fall into this, so to speak, but if you go into some other parts of West Virginia, especially in the southern part of the state, classroom sizes are very small. But what's the quality of the instruction? What's the pay? Can they get quality instructors? Is there a chance for them to build that sense of community? Because is there enough infrastructure being put into it as far as from the state government, from the federal government, things like that? So that was just something I was wondering about, like, what role does Appalachia play in this? I shouldn't just narrow it down to Appalachia, and kind of, I like the rural idea. So anyway, just something popped in there. That's the heart and soul of what I got from these two chapters. There is a discussion topic again on this one. I'll pull the discussion topic up. It's a little broad, so I want to make sure I expand on it a little bit. I don't want to read these word for word because obviously you can do that. And I'll put the link up for this. And actually, I have another one from Baylor. That's a pretty good one. But the University of Washington has something called the Dimensions of Multicultural Education. And the reason I'm bringing this up, your assignment that's not due this week, it's due the following week, but you can go ahead and submit it if you want. You have to find some articles on a topic 10 on an area of multicultural education that you think is important or you find interesting, and kind of stay in that theme. And by the way, let me just say this in case I forget. It could be special education. It could be related to a specific gender, race, anything like that. It can be instructional practices. It can be skill sets. It can be whatever. There's a lot to multicultural education. It's just not narrowed down to just what I think the stereotypes are, so to speak. You're trying to meet the need of all your students, and that can be a big, it's me drawing an umbrella. So, but just in case you're curious, what they do, and I probably should highlight these a little bit, but you want to have content integration. And what that's basically getting at really is you want to make sure, I mentioned it already, but you're meeting, you have content that connects to your audience. I may have used this example before, but if I have, I'm sorry, but it's just something I always think about. When I first started teaching, I had a history degree first, and then I got my master's at WVU and then did my doctorate at WVU. But when I first started teaching, my curriculum was very, I guess you would just call it the old white guy presidents type setup. And I didn't have a lot of important women in history. Especially, I thought women was actually my weak point where I didn't have that. And that was something I had to go back in. I'm like, oh my gosh, my class is over. It's at least half women, female. Why don't I have any women in this to make the connections? Another example that I always think of is when I was teaching World War One. I had an African American student, and he asked me about the Buffalo Soldiers and things like that. And I thought, man, that's a really, why don't I have those in there? And one thing I did, I started to connect. Usually, I would ask parents if a few students wanted to read it, and I let them. But there's a book called The Harlem Hellfighters. It's about a World War One. It's the Buffalo Soldiers, but they go into they're from Harlem and they fought in World War One. And a lot of my students, the whole class, loved that book. It has a little bit of language and such, but it was a really good graphic novel actually that you could connect. So again, just keep your class in mind and who your audience is. Um, Actually, Washington talks about the knowledge construction process. How teachers need to start understanding how to approach things in the classroom, frames of reference and such for their audience, helping students build on their knowledge. Prejudice reduction, I think this is one that a lot of people associate with multicultural education, and it is a part of it, obviously. But you want to have diverse lessons. Again, I've mentioned that. And, equality in your pedagogy. You want students to be able to facilitate conversations and be able to make the connections and maybe talk about some of this stuff at different social groups. And you want to empower your students and have pride in their backgrounds and things like that. So that's just an overview of the dimensions that Washington set up. The reason I throw these out here is I will have the Baylor link up here. I think I have it here. It also expands on some of those ideas a little bit if you want to check it out. But what you have to do is you have to make a wakelet. Pick something related to multicultural education. And again, I'm not going to be a tyrant about any of it. I think if you want to focus on a specific group or anything like that, that is totally fine. If you want to talk about a teaching method. And I just want you to find some articles related to it to just kind of do a little bit of a literacy type. I guess we'll call it a literacy review light. And I want you to put it up in a wakelet. Now you're probably asking, what the heck does he mean with a wakelet? And what I mean by wakelet is this. Wakelet is slowly pulling up is what wakelet is. very slowly pulling open up. I might have to go to Google Chrome. Let's see. We're going to get it. Let's see. Slowly. Oh my gosh, it shouldn't be this slow. Sorry. Why don't we do this? I think it might be my Safari needs updated a little bit. We'll cruise that out. I'll do this. We'll go there. Probably work a little better this way anyway. Might be Wakelet itself, but it wasn't. It was Safari. All right, Wakelet is just basically a little portfolio system. I just thought it'd be a nice way for everyone to kind of get in here and go. You just need to log in. And if you have a Google account, that's all you need to do. It does not cost any money. I think I'm logged in. I have one with my Google. We'll see. We'll find out in a second. I can't ever remember if it's under my Shepherd or under my Google. Nope, it's under my Shepherd. Let me go back. No biggie. Oh my goodness. Well, if this happened in the class, I guess you have to suffer through this too. So you may not be laughing, but let's see. Let's go back in, sign in. I think I have this under my Shepherd. This is one of the ones that if I had to go back in time, I probably would not have done this under my Shepherd. Now, here's always the big question. Yes. Got it. Not as bad as I thought. All right. So what do you need to do to make Wakelet? You can go in, just sign in, just create it on Google if that's the easiest thing for you, or you can create your own. And basically what you just do is you create a portfolio of different assignment or different articles, just to kind of give you one. I've used this a lot. As you can see, it's loading up different things. But when I've researched, I've always kind of added things. Let's just do one. All right, I'm going to create a collection. It's still a little slow loading. Could be my internet. You want to give your collection a title. You can name it whatever you want. What we're going to do, we'll do Arthurdale, West Virginia. And then description, New Deal community. Okay. Now, what you can do is at this point, you're just going to load articles up. You can do it from the web. You can do a PDF. You can do whatever. And you can see, you just click here. But let's do this. I'm going to look up Arthurdale. I'm going to cheat a little bit. Arthurdale, West Virginia. Of course, there's the school. There's the Mountaineer, history of abandoned village. Let's just pick one. I mean, we'll just pick Wikipedia. Don't do Wikipedia, but I think this is just to show you the thing. You need to do 10 on a topic, whatever you think works for you, whatever your interest is. If you're a teacher and you want to expand a little bit on like that, just hopefully it falls into one of those dimensions. I would say this would do with more like socioeconomic type issues, and that's an important multicultural issue. And but we'll put it in here. As you can see, it will hopefully load. There it is. Now, I would like you to do this for me if you could. If you click those 3 bars, it's got that there. That should have that there. And let me make sure I got it. Wikipedia has that. I'm sorry, I need to expand this. My old eyes. You can like it, no, but it is there. And then actually, you can just do the summary up here. A New Deal community in West Virginia. And actually, all I need, as you can see, it has the summary there, so it should be good. You can rearrange them up and down. And then, for example, if I wanted to do another article, have a little diversity with your articles if you could. But let's see, Eleanor Roosevelt. Make sure I don't misspell her name. And West Virginia. And hopefully they'll be on there. There it is, Arthurdale Project. And when you go on there, it talks a little bit about all that. I'm going to use that link. And I don't know if you're all planning on writing a thesis or if you have to do a big paper. If you can make something kind of connect to that, that would be awesome. Let's do another one. We'll paste that on there. As you can see, it's going to load it up. There you go. We got 2 items in there. It's just a folder. I'll admit I use this a lot. I was talking about when I talk about typing it, you don't have to worry. I meant the typing was up here. I'm sorry. I don't want to confuse anyone too much, but you just need to find 10 things related to your theme there. Um, Post them up. Now, once you get your 10 on your topic, you can share it. And all you have to do is you can send the QR code or you can copy the link and just send it to me. But you see where it says allow sharing, please click that. So you can copy the link and the link is copied. And I will tell you this in case you've never run into this. Brightspace is a little quirky and sometimes people have trouble just posting a link in it. You might have to throw it on a Word document and just put the link on there. You're welcome to use the QR code too. That's what most people do now anyway, and you can just submit that if you want. But that's the Wakelet assignment. I'll mention it again next week, but I wanted to go ahead and give you a heads up if you wanted to go ahead and do that. Since this week's a little light, I know some people like to work ahead, so I wanted to give an overview on that. But that is most of this week. There are a few small things I did want to just highlight. Sorry, I get off on a tangent. You may have noticed last week, I didn't want to go too deep, and I think I mentioned I'd make note of this. I actually put some things up. I might move those or keep this open. There were some articles on Native American mascots. I put that on there because I was thinking a little bit about our class. I was at a conference that was doing especially a lot of stuff on the civil rights and lessons. I think I sent you all the one on colorization if you wanted to check that out. I thought that was a really good one. It was a session I attended. But with that being said, I was watching the Chiefs Jaguars game in my hotel room, and you know, I am first person to it. I love Washington Commanders since I can remember. Former Redskins. They changed the name, and I have to admit, I'm one of those people. I thought the name was time to go. But I do I haven't really thought about the issue much in a little bit. Then I was watching the Chiefs game, and then was on Twitter, which that's a whole other animal. But people were making the point because they were doing war chants and things like that, and tomahawk chops. The Atlanta Braves do that. I'm not here. I know there's still a lot of high schools. I think there's still a high school in West Virginia that actually goes by the name Redskins. So it got me thinking a little bit about the mascot name. And there's just some articles that were in here: the Atlanta Braves, the Chiefs, some polls related to the Native American mascots and whether it should be used or not. So it's another topic related to the class that I thought was interesting. I wish we had more time in this class because these are some things that we can really dive into. But that's up, and I'll leave that open if you want to check them out. But I'll make sure everything is posted, and there is a discussion board that is up. It is discussion board 4. And this kind of gets into strong content and skills since she makes so much about strong curriculum. I put a quote up there, but I just wanted to know what you would consider establishing a strong course content and what skills do you think are needed of today's students. Like if you were having that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. And I did put another article up there about a well-rounded education in a flat world. So what do you think are things that you need to consider when establishing a course content? If you just a dream world, nothing, don't think about standards or anything like that. What do you want to do? Do you want to, in social studies, I would try to have a very diverse content. If I was doing West Virginia history, what are the groups I might include? What are the skills that I want? Do I want them to know map skills? Do I want them to be able to orally communicate? She talks about a strong curriculum being important for all students. So what do you think? What is a strong curriculum? I think that's the way to think about that. And that's the discussion board for this week. So hopefully I made some sense on this. And if not, feel free to contact me. I know it's a lot in a short amount of time. But with that being said, I hope everyone has a good week. I'm going to get off here because I've talked too long already. And I'll talk to you later.